Today on Inside Utah Politics, the municipal election. Ballots will start to arrive this week. Utah County Clerk Josh Daniels is here with everything you need to know to make your vote count. And hurricane preparedness. Ida leaving a path of destruction, and now lawmakers are trying to get ahead of the next disaster. Reaction from the hearing in the nation's capital.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin today with Utah County Clerk Josh Daniels, here to discuss all things municipal election. Josh, welcome to the show. So glad to have you.
Hey, great to be with you, Glenn.
Give us a general statement. What's on the line as we head into this municipal election?
You know, the sidewalks you walk on, the streets you drive on every day, the shops that you shop in on a daily basis, all things local politics at the municipal level, that's what's on the line with municipal elections.
And we're talking obviously races, mayoral, city council, but also potentially some municipalities may have measures on the ballot as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Some cities are proposing some kind of an arts or recreation or park type of a tax. A lot of mayoral candidates around the state, and of course city council.
What type of turnout do you expect in a municipal election? What do we see from that historically?
Boy, you know, historically, municipal turnout has been as low as 15 or 20%. I'm expecting 25 to 30% this year, simply because the mayoral races often draw more voters. But when you compare that to the 2020 general election, where nearly 90% of Utahns turned out to vote, that's a huge disparity. And I think, you know, people need to recognize the importance of these local elections on their daily life. The people that represent you on your city council and the policies that are implemented by your local elected officials are just as important as what happens in Washington. In fact, maybe more for you.
I was going to say, Josh, I would argue even more, because you just mentioned it. The sidewalks we walk on, the roads we drive on, garbage being picked up from your house. It all ties to the local leadership, and I've always said those who are closest to you have more impact on your life. So why do you think it is that people don't tend to get involved as much at the local level?
I won't say it's your fault, Glenn, but we all know that the media focuses on those big national issues. And so I think in the consciousness of voters, when they think about politics, they think about what's happening in Washington or at the state capitol, and they often aren't aware of what might be happening in City Hall. And so it might just be an awareness gap in the minds of most voters.
I will point out, since you made that comment, I am having you on this show right now to stress the importance of the municipal election.
Well, you put your money where your mouth is, Glenn.
All right, let's move on to important deadlines, because it is important.
Right.
People will start to see ballots arriving this week in their mailbox.
Yep, exactly. Ballots will begin arriving the week of the 12th, so starting Tuesday, which is 3 weeks before Election Day. Those ballots need to be voted, and those envelopes need to be signed, and they need to be returned before Election Day. If you're going to mail your ballot back, it needs to be postmarked the day before Election Day. If you're going to use the drop box or turn it in person at a vote center, you can do that all the way up and through Election Day, when polls close at 8 p.m. Another important deadline is if you need to change your voter registration or you need to register, the registration deadline is Friday, the 22nd of October. Now, if you miss that deadline, you can still show up in person at a voting location on Election Day and register to vote at the polls.
Yeah, so right at the polls, you can just bring whatever you need and talk about what it is you need to register same day.
Exactly. So same-day registration, you need to show up with ID and also verification of residency. So an official piece of mail, like a utility bill or something like that, that establishes both your identity and citizenship to be eligible to register to vote, and then your residency for which precinct you live in.
Josh, if you're expecting to receive a mail-in ballot but don't, what should you do?
Well, you can always call your local county elections office and often update your registration address over the phone. You can get a replacement ballot. If you didn't get a ballot in the mail, you can come into the office early. Some counties have early voting locations the week leading up to Election Day. And of course, you can always show up on Election Day. One of the nice things in Utah is counties use a vote center model, which means any county that you live in, you can go to any voting location in that county and you can vote at any voting location in the county.
You mentioned you expect, I think you said maybe 25 to 30% turnout. Are you referring to your county?
Yeah, I would expect in our county somewhere in the 30%
Okay.
range.
Will most of that be people who return mail-in ballots, or are you expecting heavy early voting and same-day voting?
Our experience is that over 90% of voters in Utah vote by mail. Whether that's returning that paper ballot in the mail or through a drop box, they are essentially returning the ballot that was sent to them in the mail.
Okay, let's get into this, a very important distinction this year. We have 23 municipalities participating in ranked choice voting. What do we need to know about that?
So ranked choice voting allows the voter to rank their choices one through as many candidates as there are. So rather than just voting for one name or maybe two, depending on how many openings there are on the city council, you can compare all the candidates and rank as many of them as you like. And then your ballot will be counted based on first place votes. But if that candidate that you put first place doesn't ultimately win, then your ballot can be counted with a second place vote. And so it's kind of an innovative method. It's pretty intuitive. You know, we all rank our choices at the grocery store. Do I prefer vanilla, strawberry, or chocolate ice cream? Well, I can't decide, but I have a rank order in my mind.
And some of those races I know have multiple candidates, upwards of 9 in some locations, so that could be really interesting. So explain exactly how that works. You have, let's say, 5 candidates, and you will go through round by round until someone reaches what percentage of the vote?
So in order to win, you have to receive a majority of the votes. And so, with 9 candidates, for example, the first round of voting, electorate opinion might be split. But as you eliminate the lowest vote-getting candidate and redistribute votes through the ranked choice voting process, eventually one of those candidates will get 50% of the remaining votes that have been cast. And so that's how ranked choice voting works.
And that's when they are declared the winner.
That's right.
Talk about from your end how this changes things for you when it comes to counting and processing the votes.
Well, one of the nice things about the way we do ranked choice voting is there's really not a lot of difference. Everyone still receives a paper ballot in the mail. They still fill it out by pen. They bubble in, the circles on the paper. We use all the same equipment to scan those ballots and to count those ballots. And then there's one final additional step where we take the final data and we run it through an auto process that automates that tabulation process and that elimination process. And so maybe 5 more minutes at the end, and we'll determine how the ranking has determined a winner. And we'll release that on election night. And of course, that's not final because we have to wait for ballots to come back.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because we've kind of become accustomed as of late to waiting maybe 2 weeks before we see the final results of some of these races. So how will that play out with ranked choice voting?
So with ranked choice voting, like with any other method of voting, the election process is the same. About a couple weeks after Election Day, the local, in this case, city councils, will act as the board of canvassers and will finalize the results. If additional ballots have come in the mail that were appropriately postmarked, those will get added into the tallies, and before finality, we'll run that ranked choice vote process one more time to determine the final winner.
All right, Josh, this will be your first election, correct, as the county clerk in Utah County. What can we expect from your office?
Well, we're going to be working hard. We like to pride ourselves in releasing election results as soon as they're ready at 8 p.m. We try to be the first if we can. So we'll continue the process, and we usually make a couple releases on election night. We often work well into the night, but we pride ourselves in being thorough and accurate, having a high level of security, so voters can have a lot of confidence in the results.
And make sure to keep your cell phone handy, because people like me will be texting you through the night.
I hope so.
All right. Hey, really important information. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still to come, a packed House as state lawmakers host a hearing on the president's vaccine mandate. Our panel debates the latest developments a little later. But first, some states under the microscope as U.S. tax havens. How federal lawmakers are addressing secretive banking practices after the break. Lawmakers are looking at ways to prevent the next disaster from happening. The FEMA administrator testifying on Capitol Hill with ways to be better prepared and telling Congress how they can help. Washington correspondent Kelly Meyer has a recap.
We are now in the crisis of our generation.
FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell delivered a staunch warning while calling on lawmakers to tackle climate change.
So our children, our grandchildren, and future generations will not have to go through what we're going through now.
Criswell testified on Capitol Hill Tuesday on the impacts from Hurricane Ida and said those types of storms are becoming more frequent, more disastrous, and more costly.
We'll continue to see that number of billion-dollar disasters only increase as we go further.
Warmer waters bring stronger storms.
Louisiana Democratic Congressman Troy Carter, whose district was hit hard by Ida, called for improvements to prevent massive blackouts.
Very difficult in the sweltering months of August to be without power for senior citizens, for people with disabilities, for our young people.
While Democrats asked about addressing climate change, Republicans focused on another crisis at the border, asking how FEMA was involved.
If the crisis at the southern border is not an emergency, as Biden proclaimed, then why was your agency deployed to the southern border?
We had a very limited role. We no longer have a presence in supporting that mission.
Criswell kept the focus on the climate, adding it shouldn't be a political issue.
Disasters don't discriminate where they're going to land. They're not red or blue.
Democrats say several investments are included in President Joe Biden's Build Back Better agenda that is currently working its way through Congress. Reporting in Washington, I'm Kelly Meyer.
A leak of documents dubbed the Pandora Papers, published by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. That leak shows U.S. states are increasingly becoming tax havens for the ultra-rich all around the world. Washington correspondent Alexandra Limon explains why.
When the rich want to hide their money, one way is by opening accounts in certain U.S. states.
They allow them to set up shop through their state under their laws without disclosing who the true owners are.
Alexandra Thornton with the Center for American Progress says rules in certain states allow accounts to more easily hide the owners' names. The investigative journalism project, the Pandora Papers, shows states like South Dakota, Florida, Delaware, Texas, and Nevada offer tax shelters for the wealthy. Those calling for change say secretive banking doesn't just allow the wealthy to dodge taxes. It could also allow criminal activity to be hidden.
If you don't even know who owns the assets, it's difficult to find out, where the money came from.
Thornton says many wealthy Americans likely were not implicated in the Pandora Papers because loopholes in the U.S. tax code already allow them to legally shield most of their wealth.
If the tax rules are changed and those loopholes are closed, then they won't be able to avail themselves legally of those kinds of practices.
The Biden administration says the president supports reforms.
He has been clear he wants to make the tax system more fair.
Congress did pass the Corporate Transparency Act, and as a result, new banking transparency rules are expected later this year. But critics say those changes alone won't solve the problem. In Washington, Alexandra Limon.
Coming up, a former presidential candidate is challenging Senator Mike Lee next year as an independent. Can he be successful? Our panel debates after the break.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Time now to dig into some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Representatives Corey Malloy and Joel Briscoe. Gentlemen, great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Hey, let's get right into the hearing we saw earlier in the week on Monday. The Interim Business and Labor Committee having a hearing on President Biden's mandates. Hundreds of people showing up, filling up multiple rooms. Representative Briscoe, let's start with you. What do you make of the turnout from this?
I'm not surprised. However, let's look at who did not come to testify. I don't recall the witness list including large corporations who have more than 100 employees. I haven't seen any of them complaining. I understand why people would be opposed to a mandate that they have to, but after President Biden's announcement that he would be seeking this, in the next few days, large numbers of large corporations indicated that they would be requiring this of all their employees.
Representative Malloy, your thoughts on the turnout?
Well, I think the turnout really shows that there is a lot of mistrust with our federal government, especially this mandate coming down from the president. And I think it really indicates that people are just a little bit tired of the government overreach that we're seeing. And there is no happiness involved in more mandates. And so I think that this event really showed that a lot of people just are not happy with it.
Representative Briscoe, Republicans in the legislature are determined to act on this in some way. How are you and your colleagues going to respond?
We're supportive of masks. We're supportive of vaccines. The governor has rolled up his sleeve and got his vaccine in public and encouraged people to do so. I think the fastest way to bring the economy back to the place we want it to be, and then some, is for people to get vaccinated.
Representative Malloy, how do you anticipate you and your colleagues are going to respond to this mandate?
Well, I think you've already seen the first steps of that response. I think we're supporting the efforts to, with the Attorney General, to fight against this. Our Senator Mike Lee, he is being very, very aggressive in his outreach and trying to stop the mandate from the president. But I think also that you're going to see continued discussions. I think businesses will continue to be very vocal in either their support or their non-support of this mandate. What I'm hearing is that most businesses are opposed to this. They don't want to be forced to do this. And I think you're also seeing...
Can you dig into that a little deeper and explain why they're telling you that? Like, what are the reasons they don't want to do that?
Well, I think it's just like anything. You don't want government coming in to telling you how to run your business, run your life, and the businesses want to be able to make those decisions for themselves. And I think that, for the most part, the legislature supports them being able to make that decision. And I think that's the key, is making sure that we don't eliminate the right of choice in the form of these government mandates, where you're penalizing businesses, which ultimately penalizes people. And we want people to feel like they can go to work, that businesses can create the policies and the things that will work best for their businesses, and just leaving government out of it. I think what we're really seeing from the people, especially here in Utah, is the fact that government's just getting involved at all levels and in areas where they really shouldn't, and let people decide for themselves the best way to take care of themselves. The same goes for businesses.
Your thoughts on that, Representative Briscoe? Is government getting too heavy-handed in the state of Utah?
I understand why people have questions about President Biden's every business with 100, but owning a business is a property right. You own that property. And I support businesses who say, please wear a mask. I support businesses who say you must wear a mask. I think that's their right.
But what about those that would fall under this mandate who don't necessarily want to do that?
That mandate is a desire by President Biden that we have yet to see the rules and regs, and it's going to be challenged in court. Right now, it's something that may or may not happen. We have yet to see it happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. We need
the courts are going to be dispositive.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to get both of your takes on. If it goes into court, is it going to be stalled, or will it be blocked, or will it be potentially stalled to the point where it just expires on its own anyway?
Well, it's hard to predict that at this point. I think, from the Republican point of view, we would hope that that would be the case, that it would be stopped or not even happen. I think the bigger issue is the rhetoric that we continually get out of this administration that just scares people. It scares people, it scares businesses, it makes them feel uneasy. There's no confidence being communicated out of this administration. And I think if we really are going to bring the people of this state and this country together, we need to start looking for solutions that don't require the heavy hand of government.
Representative Briscoe, do you find confidence in what you're hearing from the president?
I feel more comfortable. I support businesses that say you have to have a mask. I feel more like I want to participate with that business, and I feel safer physically being with that business. So I get that people don't want to do that. I think it's a small price to pay for some security.
Okay, let's move on to 2022. Very interesting race developing with challengers stepping up to face Senator Mike Lee. Representative Malloy, we saw during the week Evan McMullin, of course, he's a former presidential candidate in the state of Utah that got somewhere around 20-21% of the vote for president. How could he potentially be a challenge to Mike Lee in the general election?
Well, I think he's going to run as an independent. That's an interesting move for him. I don't think Senator Lee is going to be too concerned about it until the general election when they face off. They won't face off before that. So he'll be focused on his campaign, which I believe will include the convention. It'll include a primary race probably. And then whoever challenges him in the general election, which is where he would fall. I think you know, as an independent, he's going to be going after those who are independents or unaffiliated. Those will be his voter base, and I think he can probably get a few votes there. But I think conservative Republicans are going to stick with Senator Lee. They feel like he's done a great job, and so I think it'll look good for Senator Lee. It's going to keep him busy during the campaign season for sure.
Representative Briscoe, will Democrats potentially consider voting for Evan McMullin if they think he might have a better chance of beating Senator Lee than the Democratic nominee?
Some certainly will. I remember my mother-in-law in 2016 voted for Evan McMullin. She wanted to vote Republican. She didn't want to vote for Donald Trump, so she voted for Evan McMullin. I believe President Trump got 56% of the vote in Utah in 2020. So can Evan McMullin peel off 6-7% of that vote? It'll be tough for him, but
yeah, it was right around there. I believe it was 58 and then like 45 back in 2016.
Some Democrats will certainly vote over and vote for Evan McMullin.
Here's my question though. That 20% that McMullin got in 2016, was that really a vote for Evan McMullin, or was it a vote against President Trump? Representative Malloy.
That's hard for me to say. I voted for President Trump, and so I was behind his campaign. McMullin, I think he surprised a lot of people, but it's hard for me to really say if that was for or against Trump.
Okay. Representative Briscoe, do you see any way an independent candidate can end up knocking off an incumbent, assuming that Senator Lee comes out of the primary? He does have viable challengers there as well. Any chance of an independent winning that race?
If there's a perfect storm, yes. Yes, there is a possibility.
What would it take?
Maybe a Democratic candidate that doesn't have a lot of support from Democratic voters. Sometimes races turn on a few pieces of news that happen in the last couple of months that galvanize people for or against one particular way. Maybe President Trump comes to the state of Utah and campaigns for Senator Lee, and maybe that, as my good colleague says, that there are people who feel strongly on lots of issues for and against today.
All right. Well, it's definitely an interesting race that is starting to shape up. Gentlemen, really appreciate your insights and perspective this morning. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. We leave you now with a look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. As a reminder, we talked about it earlier, mail-in ballots will start to arrive this week for the municipal election. Election day is Tuesday, November 2nd. 23 municipalities are participating in ranked choice voting. And make sure to connect with me on social media. I'd like to know what you think of this show and other issues that are important to you. You can email me at InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Just log on and search Glenn Mills ABC4. Thanks so much for making us part of your Sunday morning. We hope to see you again next week as we go inside Utah politics.